St. Louis, Missouri, or as some call it, the gateway to the West. Or maybe you might call it the Lou, maybe you even call it the Mound City, or Rome of the West. It's debatable which nickname suits the city of St. Louis, but what isn't up for debate is that the city is without question one of the greatest sports towns in all of America. From Major League Baseball's St. Louis Cardinals to the National Hockey League's St. Louis Blues, both have proudly called the city home since forever. The St. Louis Baseball Cardinals date all the way back to the 1880s, while the St. Louis Blues have been in town since 1967. It's safe to say the city is extremely loyal when it comes to these two sports teams, and in return, both teams have delivered the city championships.
In the air to left, well hit. Back is Craig. What a team. What a ride. The Cardinals are world champs in 2011.
With both of these franchises winning titles and staying in the city as long as they have been, St. Louis is without question one of the greatest two-sport towns ever. Even though these two teams have been in the city forever, there were also two other professional sports teams that tried to make a name for themselves in the city, and while they did accomplish a few things, they ended up leaving. I'm talking about professional football in the city of St. Louis. To say it's a complicated history is an understatement. Today, we're gonna go over 4 different chapters in the history of professional football in St. Louis, from the Cardiac Cards to the greatest show on turf, to even a potential expansion team, and maybe one team that was almost stolen by the city of St. Louis, and of course, the professional football team they have today. This is the city the NFL wants you to forget. This video on Stark Raving Sports is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is an app/browser where you can place your phone or laptop anywhere in the world, and it acts like you are actually in that country. This, of course, lets you unblock websites and content that you usually wouldn't be able to see. For example, if you want to stream the United States version of HBO Max, but you're not in that country, simply switch over your location and voila, you have 100% total access. It also encrypts your data to make sure everything on your phone and laptops are safe, from your photos to your passwords. Also, Surfshark is the only VPN where you are allowed to use an unlimited number of devices. Secure your privacy with Surfshark by entering coupon code STARK for 4 extra months for free by clicking the link down in the description below. Again, secure your privacy with Surfshark by clicking the link down in the description below and using the coupon code STARK for 4 extra months for free. Once again, a huge thanks to the fine folks over at Surfshark VPN and you for supporting this channel. The Cardinals franchise was established in Chicago in 1898, but with the growing popularity of the Chicago Bears, the Cardinals couldn't compete in the city anymore. As a result, ownership sought relocation, and the Bidwells got their wish. The NFL examined a few cities, with St. Louis being one of them, and determined that the city of St. Louis could support professional football, and the franchise officially made the move in 1960. But wait, how is it gonna work with another team already being named the St. Louis Cardinals and have already been in the city for decades up to this point? Well, along with the league's blessing, the franchise also got permission from the baseball team to use the same name. Fans would either call them the Big Red or the Football Cardinals, not to confuse them with the baseball team. Although they only made the play playoffs once in the 1960s, for the most part, they were fairly competitive, posting 5 winning seasons during the decade, helping to establish their own identity in the city of St. Louis. Most of the success from this decade was due in large part to quarterback Charlie Johnson, as he set several franchise passing records. You can't forget about safety Larry Wilson neither, as he was one of the most dominant defensive players during the 1960s, introducing the league to the safety blitz. Their best season during this decade was in 1964, finishing second in the Eastern Conference and going 9-3-2. Now, during this era, the playoff bowl was basically the runner-up bowl, but it was the franchise's first playoff appearance since the late 1940s.
St. Louis goes on to score an impressive 24-17 victory, climaxing one of the greatest seasons in Cardinals history.
So what did the Bidwell brothers do to celebrate this move? Well, they're looking to move to Atlanta. What? They just got to St. Louis. What do you mean? And they just had the best season in franchise history? Basically, they grew tired of their stadium situation 5 seasons in, and already were also growing tired of having to share the stadium with the baseball Cardinals, who own the city. Everything had to coordinate with the baseball Cardinals schedule, and not the other way around. Oh, and the franchise often practiced at a public park. Can you imagine an NFL team today practicing at a public park? The franchise never left St. Louis for Atlanta, but once the 1970s rolled around, the team turned extremely bad, posting 3 straight 4-9-1 seasons. But that all changed in 1974 when in Don Coryell's second season as head coach, he would lead the Cardinals to their first playoff appearance in a decade.
On the opening day of the 74 season, it would have been difficult to find anyone in St. Louis to believe the Cardinals could become division champions in one short year.
4-9-1 to 10-4 and an Eastern Conference title, this was enough to win Don Coryell Coach of the Year. With Jim Hart at quarterback and Dan Deerdorf, one of the greatest offensive linemen on their own line, they put together one of the most potent passing offenses during this era. In 1975, they improved their record to 11-3 and also earned the nickname the Cardiac Cards. The reason they were tagged this nickname was because 8 of their games were decided in the last minute of play, as the Cardinals ended up with an impressive 7-1 record in these games. These back-to-back seasons were the peak of St. Louis Cardinals football. Even though they were able to post double-digit winning seasons, they lost in the divisional round to both the Vikings and Rams. The Don Coryell era ended embarrassingly in 1977 as they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who won their first home game at Tampa Stadium following 13 consecutive home defeats. Following this loss, he was fired and replaced with a coaching legend.
So the Cardinals set out to find the one man who would restore the team to a challenging position in the race for the Super Bowl. The man selected is simply a coaching legend. His name, Bud Wilkinson.
Bud Wilkinson was a legendary head coach in college football during the 1950s, but had been out of football for a while and was into politics. But then all of a sudden, in what seemed to be a PR move looking back, they decided to hire him out of nowhere to become their new head coach. This is where the downfall began. The team floundered from that point on. Wilkinson was fired after 2 seasons, and from 1978 to 1987, they posted only 1 playoff appearance during the strike-shortened 1982 season, losing to the Green Bay Packers in the wildcard round. They could have made the playoffs and even won the Eastern Conference if they would have made this last-second field goal against the Redskins, but this miss caused them to miss the playoffs. Rumors of relocation resurfaced for the Cards in 1985 when Bill Bidwell was left as sole owner of the team. Like in 1964, he was looking for greener pastures and was looking into relocating his team once again.
This is a drama 2 years running, which has received mostly critical reviews. An act rooted in secrecy that has worn audiences thin from coast to coast. The curtain closes Friday when star Bill No Comment Bidwill announces what stage his act will call home. The size of the theater is at issue. Tuesday, reports out of Baltimore had Bidwill drawing up a proposal for the NFL stating his intentions to move to Phoenix. Team attorney Tom Guilfoyle told us no such proposal had been prepared.
But such a plan was drawn up as the city of St. Louis and Bill Bidwill couldn't come to an agreement on a new stadium deal. In a last-ditch effort to keep the team, the St. Louis mayor at the time took out an option to buy the New England Patriots and then ultimately swap franchises with Bidwill to keep the Cardinals there. Pretty crazy, huh? Bidwill shot this idea down, and it was such a bad relationship till the very end. On March 15th, 1988, the NFL owners unanimously approved the move for the Cardinals from St. Louis to Arizona.
When the Cardinals played this game against the Giants, they knew it was their last game of the 1987 season, and they had a hint that it might be their last game in St. Louis. They were right. The Cards beat the Giants that day, but now St. Louis has lost a football team. Cards owner Bill Bidwill met for an hour with NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle, then made it official.
Well, we made the decision, Phoenix, and we're not going to explain why.
More than financial?
I think there are a lot of intangibles in any decision of this type, and we made the decision. I'm very happy with it, and I'll never second guess it.
Some fans might not notice that the Cardinals are gone from St. Louis, since many St. Louisans didn't notice the Cardinals when they were in town. It's ironic that the football Cardinals couldn't draw flies last year, while the St. Louis baseball Cardinals drew more than 3 million fans during the season, a team record. Of course, the baseball Cards went to the World Series, while the football Cardinals, although improved at 7-8 on the year, went nowhere. Now they are going somewhere. Phoenix.
Man, 28 years? After 28 years, you're just gonna leave? And it seemed like the Bidwills didn't want to be there from the very beginning. Remember, in their 5th season, their best season up to that point, they were looking to move the team to Atlanta. But despite some of the ownership's flaws, the city of St. Louis still embraced the Big Red as their own. Even today, there's a preservation society for the Big Red's history. You'll still find fans of the Big Red in the city today, although they are pretty old now. This begged the question, would the NFL want anything to do with St. Louis after the Big Red left? And just like that, a team that had been in the city for 28 years was gone. So now what? Do you wait and hope for another team to hopefully move to the city, or do you go after an expansion franchise? Well, at first, the city of St. Louis went after the expansion franchise with a very interesting ownership group led by Walter Payton, who at the time was trying to become the first minority owner in NFL history. With construction of the new dome being complete, as well as the associations from Anheuser-Busch and Walter Payton, most locals thought that they were a lock to get one of the two expansion teams. They even had the name and logo ready to go. The St. Louis Stallions was supposed to be one of the brand new expansion teams, but sadly, that didn't happen. The NFL liked the plans from Jacksonville and Charlotte a lot better and awarded the two expansion franchises to those cities. Plus, the ownership group was fractured. St. Louis icon Jerry Clinton had put down $900 million for an expansion franchise and even owned the lease to the brand new dome, but was later strong-armed out of the process due to not having enough money. And when he tried to look for a new investor, he was booted out, and in his place was Stan Kroenke, who we'll get to later in this video. With the expansion efforts failing, the next step was to take somebody else's team, and a few years later, it was looking like that would happen. The New England Patriots, who I earlier mentioned, almost were bought by the mayor of St. Louis, who was willing to swap them with Bill Bidwill's Cardinals, were once again up for sale. James Bush Orthwine, who was also a part of the Anheuser-Busch family, bought the Patriots in 1992 with the intentions of moving them. The Patriots were going to leave New England after 1993, but one man stepped in and initiated a hostile takeover and made sure that the Patriots lease was honored. that being the owner of the Patriots today, Robert Kraft. Since Orthwein couldn't relocate the Patriots, he didn't want to own them and eventually sold to Robert Kraft. While the St. Louis Stallions were never a real NFL team, you can still find merchandise on the internet from way back when, including a Tom Brady number 12 St. Louis Stallions jersey. Definitely one of the biggest what ifs in NFL history when you think about it. So what was next for St. Louis? You not only had a failed expansion effort, but you also had a failed relocation effort as well. During the 1994 NFL season, Los Angeles Rams owner Georgia Frontier wanted a brand new stadium, but the city of Los Angeles wasn't going to build her one. The city she grew up in, St. Louis, already had dome construction going on and were willing to pay her some money to relocate. The NFL tried to stop this at first, but after she threatened to sue, they eventually backed off. The St. Louis Rams era had officially begun.
In March of 1995, the relocation to St. Louis became official, and so began a momentous and mobile year. The Rams organization loaded up 17 huge moving vans and headed east to the heartland.
I think everyone's tremendously excited about this day. I was involved in the previous effort, and I know how it goes when it goes the other way. So I want to echo Senator Eagleton's remarks and just tell everyone, let's go out there and really blow the drawers off this PSL campaign, because I'd like to show the people and I'd like to show the other owners, and I'd like to show the national media that this is a football town. Thank you.
People forget that current Rams owner Stan Kroenke did help them move from Los Angeles to St. Louis back in the mid-90s. We'll revisit him a little bit later in the video, but in the meantime, St. Louis once again had football for the first time since 1987. At first, it was looking like it was going to be a Cinderella story type season in 1995. The Rams kicked off their new era in St. Louis with a 5-1 record, but a spirit-crushing loss to their rival San Francisco 49ers sent them reeling out of playoff contention, and they ended up finishing the season 7-9. That would be their best record in their first 4 seasons, as the St. Louis Rams continued to be one of the laughingstocks of the league. They hadn't even made the playoffs since way back in 1989. Head coach Dick Vermeil won less than 10 games in his first 2 seasons. In 1999, trying to save his job, he knew he needed to upgrade this offense. But nobody, and I mean nobody, knew what was going to take place that season.
Warner drops, throws to Hakeem in the end zone. Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, the rookie. Double pass to Marshall, touchdown,
Wait, what? The Rams hadn't won a championship since they were in Los Angeles back in the 50s. Now, all of a sudden, this losing franchise, now in St. Louis, were world champions? Again, nobody was expecting this Cinderella story. Kurt Warner, who had once bagged groceries at the Hy-Vee grocery store, was now bagging wins in the NFL and had officially bagged the MVP award. You also had running back Marshall Falk, along with the wide receivers Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Oz Hakeem, Ricky Proehl. This gave birth to the greatest show on turf era. And let's not forget, they also had a very underrated defense that helped them win the Super Bowl, as the Titans came up just 1 yard short. St. Louisans always saw the baseball Cardinals compete for the World Series, so it was unbelievable that out of nowhere, the St. Louis Rams, who were once the doormats of the league, all of a sudden ran the league and were Super Bowl champions. But this wasn't just a one and done year. Even though head coach Dick Vermeil retired after their Super Bowl victory, Mike Martz, who was the offensive coordinator and architect of the greatest show on turf, was now promoted as head coach, and over the next 2 seasons, he kept this offense running. Marshall Falk won MVP in 2000, with Kurt Warner winning it once again in 2001. The Rams lost in the wild card round to the Saints in 2000, but in 2001, they came back stronger than ever. With an upgraded defense and the same greatest show on turf offense, they were able to go 14-2, their best record in franchise history, and beat the Eagles in the NFC Championship to make it back to the Super Bowl. People thought the Super Bowl was already decided as the Rams were taking on the New England Patriots. Remember them? Wide receiver Ricky Proehl famously said before the game, "Tonight, a dynasty is born." He just didn't know that that dynasty would happen on the other sideline.
This sucks, man.
The Patriots had played the Rams earlier in the season and had figured out some of their offensive techniques. Slants and in cuts was really the name of the game, and they were able to stop them by pretty much smashing them in the mouth. The Rams' high-powered offense couldn't get anything figured out until the second half. Really, the fourth quarter, they put in a hurry-up offense and finally were able to move the ball, and at the end of the game, it was all tied up, and it looked like we were about to have our first ever Super Bowl go into overtime. But this was Tom Brady's first Super Bowl. Even with this upgraded Rams defense, he was able to methodically work his way upfield and set up an Adam Vinatieri game-winning field goal.
It hurts inside. It hurts so bad sometimes you wonder, man, I wish I wasn't here. But you understand how special you are to be there.
There's a lot of stuff that you could point back to and say, man, if we just could have done this or we just could have done that. And it was devastating, but it makes you hungry. You know, that's what you keep going for. We had the taste of victory. We had the agony of defeat, and we know that victory is much sweeter.
Sadly, this was the beginning of the end for not only the greatest show on turf, but really the St. Louis Rams. Much like the St. Louis Arch, with a steep rise came an equally steep decline. The Rams suffered the Super Bowl hangover in 2002, starting the season 0-5, and with quarterback Kurt Warner injured, Mark Bulger took over and was at least able to lead the team to a 7-9 season. In 2003 and 2004, however, they were still able to make the playoffs. 2003, they go 12-4, and there you think, all right, perhaps the greatest show on turf has returned, but with Bulger at quarterback and Warner now riding the bench. Unfortunately, they would go on to lose in the divisional round to the Carolina Panthers at home in double overtime. Warner was released after the season, and in 2004, the Rams made it back to the playoffs, although they were 8-8 and snuck in and did get a wildcard win against the Seahawks, but were later blown out in Atlanta against the Falcons. Nobody knew this at the time, but that Atlanta blowout would be the final time the St. Louis Rams were ever in the playoffs. By the time Kurt Warner came back with the Arizona Cardinals to play his former team in St. Louis, it felt like the entire Rams organization was imploding right before our very eyes.
As far as the Rams are concerned, it has been a rough week. They lost last week in Seattle. Then Monday, the scathing article in Sports Illustrated where one anonymous Ram ripped into a number of his teammates on the defensive line. Then two coaches get in a fight during the week of practice.
During 2005, head coach Mike Martz had to leave his position due to health reasons, and even tried to take some of the control back while he was gone, but the front office put a stop to that after he tried to have a phone delivered to his offensive coordinator's room during the game. You'd think one of the coaches that helped win you a Super Bowl would get some leeway, but nope. They decided it was time to move on. After 2005, he was let go as head coach. And really, this is where the real downfall begins. Under new head coach Scott Linehan, they went 8-8 in 2006, and there seemed to be some hope again. But from 2007 to 2011, the Rams would only post 15 wins in 5 seasons. It was also during this era when Georgia Frontier died in 2008, leaving the Rams ownership in limbo. By 2010, Stan Kroenke had took over as majority owner of the team. The bright spot during this era was in 2010 when they posted 7 victories and had a shot at winning the NFC West. If they beat Seattle, they would have made the playoffs and hosted a playoff game in St. Louis against the New Orleans Saints. But unfortunately, their offense was a no-show, and they ended up losing to the Seahawks. And the Seahawks ended up going 7-9, and the following week, they beat the New Orleans Saints in what is now known as the Beastquake. This era of St. Louis Rams football was pitiful, but at least they had a bright spot. Steven Jackson, who in my opinion is one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, put the team on his back and did whatever he could. The game that stands out to me the most was the 2009 game against the Detroit Lions. They needed a win, and if they didn't get a win, they probably would have gone 0-16 that season, but Steven Jackson put the team on his back and carried them to their only win that year. And also keep in mind, even though the team went 1-15 in 2009, Steven Jackson led the NFC in rushing and was second in the league overall. By 2012, they needed some wholesale changes, not just with the head coaching, but the front office. Pretty much everything you can think of needed to be scrubbed clean. They introduced Les Snead as their new general manager, who is still on the job today, and Jeff Fisher as their new head coach. While Jeff Fisher was a solid hire, there was also some people thinking, now wait a minute. He hadn't coached since the Tennessee Titans fired him in 2010, and when he was hired by them as head coach, this was when they were about to move. So some St. Louians thought, are we really about to lose another NFL team? And those thoughts were confirmed in 2014 when it was revealed that owner Stan Kroenke had bought a huge chunk of land out in Los Angeles.
Now what does Stan do with that land? Well, it could be developed, housing, it could be developed for shopping, it could be developed for hotels. But at 60 acres, there's just enough land to put an NFL-sized stadium in there, because the average footprint for an NFL-sized stadium is somewhere between 15 to 27 acres.
By 2015, it had gotten really awkward in the city. Sure, the Rams had turned it around a bit, going from garbage to mediocre, and sure, they had a potentially good young roster with Aaron Donald on defense and Todd Gurley on offense, but St. Louians didn't really want to support the team because they expected them to leave at season's end. The Rams played what would be their final home game in St. Louis on December 17th, 2015, beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Rams applied for relocation on January 4th, 2016, and a few weeks later in Houston, it was approved. They would move to Los Angeles, and so would the Chargers a year later, and they would be able to share the new stadium that Stan Kroenke was going to be building. While St. Louis was disappointed it was going to be losing professional football again, they were even more disgusted with what was said in the application. The application to move the Rams was 29 pages long, and it listed a bunch of reasons for why they wanted out. Kroenke complained that the St. Louis economy was impossible to succeed in, but the reality was the Rams hadn't been good in over a decade. Nobody's gonna see that, especially with the Blues and the Cardinals winning all the time. And plus, if a team is rumored to leave in a city that you love and live in, why would you want to go support them anyway? This seemed like a well-done manipulation on Stan Kroenke's part to get the team out of St. Louis as soon as possible, and it was crazy because he's from the city, he grew up there, so you would think that he would pour everything he could into the team. Well, now he does, now that they're in LA. Ever since the Rams moved to LA, they have been to 2 Super Bowls, winning one of them. And I can assure you, the people of St. Louis were not very happy about this at all. Well, that's okay, because the city would end up getting the last laugh. How? The team left. Well, in April of 2017, St. Louis decided to sue the NFL because of the Rams' relocation process. And the NFL really didn't look good during this case, and other owners were pretty pissed with how Stan Kroenke handled the situation, because during one of the meetings, when they were discussing the topic, Stan Kroenke was told to leave the room immediately. That's how pissed some of these other owners were with how the process went. The case was closed in November of 2021, and the end result was a $790 million settlement. Sure, it might seem like a drop in the bucket to a certain degree, but at least the city of St. Louis could say, hey NFL, we got you, and we are never going to forget how you treated us towards the end there. Once again, a professional football team that was in the city of St. Louis for over 20 years is leaving, and the way they left this time was just so disrespectful that it made Bill Bidwell look like a saint. At least the city was able to make the NFL reach a settlement of over $700 million, but just the way they were describing the city was making it seem like it wasn't a football town. How can you not be a football town when you've had 2 professional football teams be in the city for over 20 years? Stan Kroenke is forever vilified in the city he grew up in. It felt like they didn't even try to win towards the end. It just felt like they were trying to do a well-done manipulation to get the team out of town and say, oh, they're not interested. Yeah, they're not going to be interested in a team that didn't make the playoffs in over a decade. This is a city that has teams consistently making the playoffs in both the Cardinals and the Blues. This isn't anywhere close to a situation like in the NBA when the Vancouver Grizzlies moved to Memphis. They weren't even there for a decade. Now a football team that brought the city a championship is leaving. And how does the team acknowledge that first Super Bowl today? In the latest Super Bowl ring from the 2021 Los Angeles Rams championship season, the Super Bowl ring has 2 palm trees representing both Super Bowl victories. I get why they added that to the ring, but it just feels weird just knowing that it was in St. Louis, not in LA. The city was left without professional football for a few years there. Wait, only a few years? The NFL is never going to return there, right? Well, the NFL didn't, but you have 2 other leagues, the XFL and the now named UFL. Well, really it's the same, but they combined the 2. It's a little confusing. Anyways, in 2020, the XFL returned and brought a team to St. Louis. The St. Louis Battlehawks, before COVID, led the league in attendance by a landslide.
And a kickoff return for Joe Powell to the end zone. And now they say he stepped out. No, touchdown, St. Louis.
And then when they came back, this time under the UFL banner, they still continue to lead the league in attendance by a landslide. St. Louis has had one of the most complicated histories when it comes to professional football. On paper, it may seem like this isn't a football town when you consider that 2 NFL franchises have skipped town, but in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. St. Louis will continue to be a great sports town with or without football. When both the Big Red and Rams were good, they had a ton of support within the city. But over time, ownership just lacked any sort of interest to keep them in the market. Instead, vying for situations that had better stadium deals and better weather. Without question, the city of St. Louis definitely deserved better, and it even begs the question, why would they even want football at this point? You'd think two teams leaving that were there in the city for over 20 years would completely turn the city off from football, but that's not the case. As the Battlehawks have proven, this is still a football town. Both teams leaving isn't an indictment on the city itself, it's more of an indictment on the league. St. Louis has been done wrong by the league twice now, and finally on paper, at least in the courts, they made them pay. The NFL wants you to forget this city, and they want you to think that St. Louis is not worthy of being a football town. But I can assure you, St. Louis is a football town, and they will continue to support the Battlehawks heavily. And hopefully, this support for the Battlehawks will serve as the launching pad to maybe, just maybe, getting the NFL back in St. Louis.